Right. Hello, everyone. On behalf of JFF, Chicago Women in Trades, and West Virginia Women in Works, I'd like to welcome you to day one of our two-day event, Women in Skilled Manufacturing Apprenticeships and Careers, an Introduction to Equity and Inclusion. The event is supported by JFF's Industry Partner Contract through the United States Department of Labor, and we'd like to extend our thanks to DOL for its support. My name is Rachel Crowfoot, Senior Communications Manager at JFF Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning, and I'll be your event producer for the next 2 days. If you've only registered for today, we'll share the registration link for day 2 later on. You won't want to miss it. We have some really great content tomorrow. As you get settled in, wanted to go over the logistics for today's event really quickly. First, this event is being recorded, and we'll be sharing the recording and resources for both days with you by early next week. Second, while we have a great lineup that I'll go over in a moment, we also encourage you to share your thoughts, questions, and comments, and you can do that in a few ways. One is to use the chat functionality on the WebEx platform. If the panel isn't already up for you, you should be able to access it on the bottom right of your screen. And the second way is through our online platform, Miro, which I'll bring up now. We'll be sharing the link for this in just a moment with you. On this platform, we have 2 big questions for you to weigh in on. The first is, what barriers have you seen to increasing the number of women in the manufacturing industry? Where are there opportunities? The second is, this year, we as a country are collectively coping with the COVID-19 pandemic and the essential reexamination of racial inequalities. How have these affected the recruitment and retention of women in the manufacturing industry? To give your thoughts, simply double-click on a sticky note and type them in. Or drag a sticky note from the side to where you want to place it, and then type your thoughts. These are anonymous, but you're welcome to add your name and organization if you'd like. You can resize your note by dragging the corners. And you can zoom in and out with the buttons to your bottom right. Or also, if you are on the type of computer that allows it, you can just tap in and out. You can respond to something either by putting your sticky close to it, or by right-clicking, or by clicking the comment button over here on the left, and then selecting the sticky to put the comment on. To move around the board, just click anywhere in this gray grid and drag around. If you have questions, we've included instructions up at the top of the board. Or you could also use Miro's chat functionality, and one of our staff members will assist you. My colleague Mark will be sharing the link to the Miro board in the chat. And you also should have the link in the reminder email you received for the event. With that, let's take a look at today's agenda. First, we'll be hearing from Eric Delesnow, Senior Advisor at JFF and lead of our Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning, and John Palish, Assistant Secretary for Employment and Training at the U.S. Department of Labor. Then we'll spend the rest of our time together hearing from employers and apprentices about why this topic is so important and ideas on how we can support women in manufacturing careers. Today's session will close out at 2:30 Eastern Time. And again, we have day 2 happening tomorrow. That event is from 1 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And now it's my pleasure to hand it over to Eric Delesnow to get us started. So thanks very much for joining us today, Eric.
Great, Rachel. Thanks. And please let me know if you can't hear me. Good afternoon, everybody. We got a large group of people on the phone across the country, and I want to thank you all for making the time to join this important conversation today. Typically, I do a lot of these introductions, but we felt it important to have our CEO, Maria Flynn, CEO of JFF, do that. Unfortunately, Maria has a health problem and is required to be in the hospital last night and home today. So I'm subbing for Maria, our fabulous CEO here at JFF. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining. Like I said, we have a lot of people on the line. This is a 2-day event on recruiting, training, retaining women in manufacturing and apprenticeship jobs, or apprenticeship opportunities, I should say. We have such a mix of speakers and trainers and roundtable participants. It's fabulous that we get so much connections here. Tradeswomen, employers, organizations, public agencies, and others. And we're covering topics really specifically on equity and inclusion, some of the barriers faced by women and people of color in manufacturing. They're going to be using this very cool Miro platform that I haven't been trained on, but I look forward to participating with everybody with this. But we know the action in apprenticeship in this country really has been the last 5.5 years. Prior to that, very little was going on. It was in the purview of the building trades and unions, and some great apprenticeship programs in the history of the last 100 years in this country. But really in the last 5.5, 6 years, starting with the Obama administration, continuing on to the current administration, there is a renewed emphasis and focus on apprenticeship, and it's the pedagogy, or the whole idea of integrating the education, training, and on-the-job learning that has really taken hold in this country. DOL's data shows a pretty serious increase in the number of employers and number of participants joining apprenticeship type programs. When you look at all the data of all the range of workforce programs, and there's a lot of really good workforce programs out there, apprenticeship is really at the top of the list in terms of completion rates, earnings, and most importantly in job retention at 94%. So it's really, from an evidence-based, a really effective workforce training program. So glad to see DOL so invested in it, and continuing to invest in it. And as I'm sure if you've just watched any of the DOL ETA grant announcements that have come out in the last few months, most of them are focused on apprenticeship and work-based learning, which is happening all over. More and more employers are getting engaged in it. But for us, and today, look, the reality is that we're in a COVID world. We're in a world of a lot of social unrest and social justice happening. There's just a lot of disruption in the workforce generally. Manufacturing in this country is uneven. Some have been hit really hard by the downturn and COVID, and some have been growing and expanding. So it depends where in the country you are, what subsector of the industry you're in. But we're convinced that there are growth opportunities and opportunities for, manufacturers have been saying the same thing for the 30 years I've been in the workforce. We just can't get the workers with need, with the skills, we want, with the skills that they need to have. And so, some of our view at JFF certainly is to grow your own, right? Get engaged, put a little skin in the game as an employer, develop your own pipeline, and grow the workers with the skills and competencies you need to be successful. And apprenticeship is an excellent opportunity to do that. JFF launched our Center for Apprenticeship. I missed a very important data point. Women account for less than 1 in 3 manufacturing workers, probably a lot less than 1 in 3, despite being about half of the overall workforce. So women are underrepresented in apprenticeship in general. I believe it's about 7 or 8% representation across the board. Some of the grant programs DOL are doing now may improve that over time, but it's still at about 7 or 8%. And manufacturing, it's really underrepresented by less than a third of the workers. That's according to the Manufacturing Institute. So there's a need. There are good jobs. There's good wages. There are pay disparities in apprenticeship between white men and women, and there's a pay disparity in apprenticeship between white men and African Americans. So, part of this whole effort is to reduce these disparities and provide opportunities for people to get good jobs and good wages, particularly those who have not had access and opportunity to the promise of apprenticeship. So JFF launched our Center for Apprenticeship back in 2017. We have a number of DOL contracts and grants, as well as private philanthropy. Walmart Salesforce has supported us. And what we try to do is build the capacity and provide training and support for stakeholders, employers, and others around the country who are trying to engage in apprenticeship. And we are the manufacturing intermediary National Manufacturing Intermediary for DOL. So thank you, Assistant Secretary, for that. I really want to thank Lauren and the gang at Chicago Women in the Trades for partnering up with us on this. West Virginia Women Work and all the tradeswomen employers and organizations that will be participating today. We really couldn't have done it without you, or you couldn't have done it without us, maybe, I don't know, but it's great to have this partnership to work on this very important issue, particularly at this really pivotal time in our economy. So enough for me. I could talk about apprenticeship for hours. I could talk about how it's in cyber and IT and building trades and healthcare and manufacturing and in a lot of different places. But it is growing. Employers are becoming familiar with it. We still have to work on addressing the myth and misperceptions about registered apprenticeship, and that it can work for all, and get more employers into the game. So without further ado, you've heard enough from me for sure, but on behalf of Maria, thanks for joining in today. And again, we're pushing 400 people from across the country who are participating, and more joining every minute. So really appreciate the participation today. So let me move on and talk about Assistant Secretary Palish, who will be joining us today, I assume from DC, although I don't know whether he's in his office or working from home. But Assistant Secretary Palish is the Assistant Secretary for Employment and Training. And what's important about that is that there are several divisions at DOL, but Assistant Secretary for Employment and Training pretty much runs the ETA, Employment Training Administration, and all of the range of workforce, everything from trade to WILA to apprenticeship to unemployment insurance. So Mr. Secretary Palish is a very busy man these days, particularly with the UI issues going on and then their focus on apprenticeship. He worked at DOL previously as a Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Mine Safety Health Administration. More recently, he's been with Kentucky in the Department of Labor in the Office of Employment Training, leading initiatives to improve outcomes in workforce education and training. So you know he knows what he's talking about if he came from doing workforce at a state level. It's where all the action is. I was fortunate enough to work in a state in my prior history. So, you know, he's familiar with the workforce issues that we all deal with. And, you know, certainly at the state level, you get that. Oh, and he's an Ohio State alum, okay, with a law degree from Pepperdine University, and probably is suffering from football this year. But in any event, without any further ado, let me introduce Secretary Palish to talk a little bit about what the department is doing. And Secretary, I'd really like to thank you for making the time to join us today for this very important session on women in manufacturing and providing more opportunities and access for women in this trade. So Secretary Palish, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks to everybody else from Chicago Women in Trades and JFF and West Virginia Women Work for hosting this important event. And I appreciate you all giving me some time to talk at you about the things we're doing here at the department and how we might be able to help improve the diversity of both the participants and the programs within the apprenticeship world. I think that's what we're all after is really growing the apprenticeship model. It's a proven model, as Eric was mentioning. It's been proven for the last 80 years, and now the charge that I have is to try to grow that model to non-traditional occupation, to underrepresented populations, just really as much as we can bring the apprenticeship model to folks who, for one reason or another, have not taken advantage of it. And more so than ever now with COVID and the virus and as Eric mentioned, the unemployment issues that we're dealing with, apprenticeship should be a safe harbor for folks to look to. Later this week or early next week, we'll be announcing a pretty aggressive campaign to spread the word about apprenticeships and to make sure that folks understand. Oftentimes there's a stigma associated with apprenticeships, and we certainly want to remove that. We want folks to know that apprenticeship is not just another pathway, but a very profitable pathway to a career. So everything that we're doing here at the department is about growing the apprenticeship model, growing the number of individuals who are able to become apprentices. Earlier this year in May, we announced a new rule for the industry-recognized apprenticeship program. That's just another way that we are expanding the apprenticeship model outside of the traditional construction trades to other non-traditional occupations, and really trying to open that up and bring more people, more industries, IT, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, any number of industries, bring those into the apprenticeship space, the work-based learning space, because we all know the results. We all know the retention rates, 94% retention rate, $70,000 starting salary. But it's our job to make sure that other folks, our customers and businesses out there are aware of what's available. And sometime in the next week or two, we'll be announcing the first round of what are called standard recognition entities. These are groups underneath the new IRAP rule that will begin recognizing industry-recognized apprenticeship programs. So we've tried to move responsibility for the IRAP program a little bit out of DC, not thinking that we have all the answers here, but pushing that down to businesses, to community colleges, to trade associations, to unions, to whomever wants to stand up and step in as an SRE and say, hey, we know what it takes, we know what the skills are, we know the competencies that are needed in this particular sector, in this particular industry, and we want to bring on IRAPs. We want to help companies stand up IRAPs to create that pipeline for the workforce that they need. And we're really excited about that rule. We're excited about announcing our first round of SREs, and hopefully there'll be many more. At the same time, we continue to grow the registered program. As Eric mentioned, if ETA is good at one thing, it's handing out grants. So we push a lot of money out the door every year, and a lot of that money is focused on expanding apprenticeships. Last year was around $200 million. And quite frankly, I don't see that number going down in the coming years. I see that number only growing in terms of the emphasis that I'm getting from the folks above me to grow the apprenticeship model, to really make sure that we've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of individuals becoming apprentices each and every year. Manufacturing is going to always be an important and significant part of our economy. In fact, I'm told that for every job created in manufacturing, 2.5 jobs are created in other sectors. So we know that there are untapped resources out there. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics last week issued their JOLTS report, which is their job opening and labor turnover survey. And it indicated that there's 6.6 million job openings right now in America. So we know that the economy is coming back. We know that manufacturing is going to be a key part of the economy. We know that the apprenticeship model is a proven model, so it's incumbent upon the Department of Labor to help organizations such as yours take advantage of this. So how can we facilitate? How can we help? How can we clear out the bureaucracy so that organizations such as yours can help customers, which is what we're ultimately at the end of the day, is really driving performance and making sure that customers are served. Customers are going back to work. Customers can also be the employers. You know, are we providing the workforce that employers need? So manufacturing is huge. As I mentioned, the advanced manufacturing industry is critical to our competitiveness. Challenges exist, and we want to work with you to deal with an aging workforce. We want to work with you to attract the skilled workers you need. We want to invest in future talent. Those are all things that we're trying to do through expanding apprenticeships and really, like I said, creating multiple pathways for individuals to join the labor force. So I look forward to continuing to partner with Chicago Women in Trade and JFF and any other organization who raises their hand and says, hey, we want to be part of this apprenticeship model. We want to get on board. We want to figure out how we can help develop the next level of talent for workers and for employers as they look to reopen the economy, as we all hopefully go back to work. Eric, unfortunately, I've been in the office every day since March. This beautiful backdrop is my office, but not everybody is back to work, and we know that, and we're cognizant of that. I walk into a building that used to have 4,300 people in it, and now every day it's got about 300 people. So we know that the economy is not where it needs to be. We know that employers don't have the workers they need. We know that folks don't have the skills and competencies they need. So every day we wake up and we push harder for that, and that's what drives us to work with organizations such as yours to figure out how we can do that. How can we provide that pipeline? How can we provide that opportunity for individuals? So I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. I appreciate what you all are doing, and I'm not exactly sure what the agenda is. I've got some time. I'm happy to take a few questions. I don't want to just talk at folks. I'd much rather have a dialogue or answer some questions.
Yeah, if somebody wants to send a question into the chat, I'm happy to pass that on to the secretary. I think we have another minute or two, so I'll just ask. Well, I just want to thank you, I think, for the continued investment and priority that the administration is making in apprenticeship. Like I said, we're on about a 5.5-year run. It's really impressive work, and all of the funding that you've done to support apprenticeship and diversity, which still remains a high priority, I know, for the department and many of us on the phone here, so we appreciate that. And Ms. Secretary, I also want to thank you for your work, not only on apprenticeship, but on UI. We know it's challenging times across the country, and unemployment insurance is a really big issue right now. So we know that falls under your domain, so I know that that's a challenge there. So if anybody's got any questions, you can shoot them to chat. And if not, we'll just, well, let me ask you one question, Ms. Secretary, while I got you here. What is I know the administration has been clearly supportive and behind apprenticeship, and I know there's some conversations going on the Hill. Where do you think the Hill is? Our legislature is on apprenticeship, and are they going to continue their support of the apprenticeship activities?
I don't profess to speak for the Hill, but I can tell you what we're hearing. I do think apprenticeship, in theory, is unique in the sense that everybody agrees with apprenticeship. Everybody likes apprenticeship. Customers like it, Congress likes it, employers like it, the department likes it. Where we get into issues is exactly where we're going to put the emphasis on the apprenticeship programs. Obviously, this administration has made a hard push with the IRAP rules, very much There we go. This administration very much wants to create kind of an industry-driven, demand-driven apprenticeship model to supplement the registered program. There is talk on the Hill of taking up legislation about the NAA, so I would foresee that coming. I don't know where that legislation will go. We will presumably be asked for technical assistance on that, and we will provide that as we always do. But I think interest in apprenticeships will only grow, not only here at the department, but across Washington, D.C. in terms of, like I said, recognizing that it's a model that works. We've just got to figure out how to come together and really push in the same direction so that we can really expand the model.
Okay, great. Well, Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for joining us today. I know you have a lot on your plate. You've got a great team in your Office of Apprenticeship, and all of us probably work with some of them in all of our work across the country. So we really appreciate them and the priority you're placing on apprenticeship and diversity in apprenticeship. And with that, I understand we're a couple minutes beyond time, so I want to thank you for joining us today. That'll conclude our session with the Secretary, and I'm going to turn it now over to my dear friend who I haven't seen in a while except on video, Lauren Sugarman with Chicago Women for the Trades. Lauren?
Thank you so much, Eric. It's great to be working with Jobs for the Future. And I want to say a very special thank you to Assistant Secretary Palish. We really appreciate you joining us and offering the encouragement and support for apprenticeship and for creating more diversity in the manufacturing sector and in apprenticeship as overall. So hello, everyone. I'm so excited you're joining us today. I'm Lauren Sugarman, the Director of the National Center for Women's Equity in Apprenticeship and Employment at Chicago Women in Trades. And on behalf of all of our partners across the country, including West Virginia Women Work, our other co-hosts today, we want to express our gratitude for the Department of Labor's investment in equity and inclusion as a vital part of the effort to expand apprenticeship in America. It seems clear that manufacturing jobs will be key to the economic recovery as we rebound from the pandemic. But even as many companies, as Eric and the Assistant Secretary mentioned, report that they're facing a critical skills shortage, connecting women to these jobs comes with a distinct challenge. A recent report by Deloitte and the Manufacturing Institute states that there's one obvious source of human capital that the manufacturing industry has not fully tapped, and that's women. It's good business for industry to tap this labor source, but it is also critically important for women's economic security to be able to enter this workforce. Ensuring equitable access to these jobs is critical, as women overrepresented in fields such as retail and hospitality are facing catastrophic job losses, as many of these traditional employers may never reopen after the pandemic. Women have so much to gain when they enter apprenticeships in skilled manufacturing occupations. The skilled trade positions, such as industrial electricians and maintenance technicians, offer wages of $60,000 a year compared to jobs in production, which average between $27,000 to $46,000. But currently, the majority of women who work in manufacturing are clustered into those production jobs, primarily characterized by low wages and low skills. It's this continuing occupational segregation by gender that leads to women's economic insecurity. In the Chicago area, women's overall poverty rate is more than 20% higher than that of men. This disparity, compounded by racial inequity, results in a poverty rate for African American women that is 3.5 times higher than that of white men. In rural areas, we see the same disparity. In Allen County, Ohio, men had a median income of $43,000 versus $31,000 for women. The principal reason for women's poverty is pay inequality, with African American women earning just 70% of the wages earned by white men, and Latina women earning even less at 60%. Only 7.2% of women work in male-dominated occupations, and with more than 5 times as many women as men working in occupations with poverty-level wages. The programs we are featuring today and tomorrow, and the employers that are here with us, offer both direct service and technical assistance programs that are a proven model for bridging women to success in non-traditional apprenticeships and occupations. And these jobs not only offer better wages, but one of the economic benefits is paid on-the-job training, as well as comprehensive benefit programs, including pensions that help women be secure beyond their working days. But the manufacturing industry has work to do to ensure equity for women. According to the Institute for Women's Policy Research report, women have not benefited from the renewed growth in manufacturing. While men's employment in manufacturing increased by 614,000 from 2010 to 2014, women's employment in the sector has remained flat at just 44,000, just 7% of the total. So why the disconnect? The pipeline problem is multifold. We start with gender stereotypes that follow girls and women through school and their careers. But also women are far less likely to have related experience, knowledge of the pathways or connection into the industry, and they may, especially in a time of COVID, be significantly disadvantaged in a competitive application process. And this challenge is compounded by interviewers' implicit biases, and likely more men will be competing for these opportunities, especially in light of COVID. Moreover, selection procedures, especially for in-house manufacturing apprenticeship programs, coupled with the daunting prospect for women of having to prove your right to work in a male-dominated occupation, this can derail many women from entering and succeeding in these fields. Our experience has taught us that women, particularly women of color with no or limited prior exposure to the trades, greatly benefit from pre-apprenticeship training, along with the support services and connection to a community of women who are working in the same field. We can build a better pipeline, but in addition to preparing women for the industry, apprenticeship programs, employers, and unions in these male-dominated sectors need to better understand the challenges women face to seek to successfully enter and be retained and advance in male-dominated occupations. And these employers, unions, and apprenticeship programs need to take the steps to redress these barriers. And that starts with setting goals to increase the number of women and people of color you're hiring, ensuring good training, conducting professional development, and actively working to create equitable and inclusive workplaces. As our nation focuses on equity and inclusion with new intensity, we all must act with intention and strategic blueprints to ensure that women and people of color have an equitable seat on the workbench. I'm looking forward to the program we put together today and tomorrow, and I'm so very pleased to kick it off with some leaders in the field who will share what they know makes a difference to ensure equity and inclusion. Due to the hurricane hitting parts of Mississippi right now, we've had to make some alterations to our agenda. And I just want to acknowledge Ingalls Shipbuilding Company, who can't be here today, but had planned to share some of their successes with our partner Women in Construction in Biloxi, Mississippi. I'd like to thank Leah Rambo for stepping in to help us kick off the first panel. Leah began her career as a sheet metal apprentice in 1988. In 2011, she was appointed as the first woman to serve as Director of Training for Sheet Metal Smart Local 28, and she continues to work in this capacity, making a huge difference. As Director of Training, she's been responsible for training over 3,000 of their apprentices, and she's significantly increased women's participation. She was also recently elected to her union's executive committee, the first woman to serve, and she helped to found SMART's International Women's Committee. Following Leah, I'd like to introduce Heidi Roof. She's the HR manager at EuropeTech USA in Clarksburg, West Virginia. EuropeTech is a relatively small company which offers a wide array of technical glass products and works closely with our partner West Virginia Women Work. She is always willing to help West Virginia Women Work in any way she can, promoting their programs and actively collaborating to find suitable candidates. She grew up in Switzerland, where apprenticeship is more common. And our final speaker of this segment is Danita Dixon. She's a production supervisor with First Quality Retail Services. She started as a caterer and assumed positions of increased responsibility, including machine operator, line lead, and quality engineer. She's held the role of production supervisor for 12 years and oversees a 50-member team and 8 production lines. So I'm going to turn it over to Leah, who will kick us off and pass the baton to Heidi and then to Danita. Thank you, Leah. Leah, you need to put your mic on mute.
I was saying good afternoon or morning for our West Coast people. It's a privilege to be able to talk to you this morning about something that I'm very passionate about and something very close to my heart. As Lauren mentioned, I did start my apprenticeship in 1988, and it was quite a bit different then for women, especially for women of color, than what it is now. And I think that was one of the things that kind of put me on the trajectory of my path, my career path, is wanting to make those changes, and also understanding the value of an apprenticeship. I'll share one fact with you, which to me says it all about the monetary value and the great careers that you can get through apprenticeships and through manufacturing trades. I bought a home in my early 20s, which was pretty unheard of for a woman, for a young woman, and for a Black woman back then. And the only reason I was able to do it is because of the ability to earn a salary through apprenticeship that allowed me to do that. So the sheet metal, air, rail, and transportation workers, we are the only trade that also has a manufacturing portion, production worker portion of our trade, where we start with a raw material and make it and send it out to our various contractors to make the product that we need. As a young apprentice coming in, it was very quickly noticed that it was going to be harder. There was very few women on the job. And one of the things that I did long for is having a role model, having a mentor, having a type of peer. And that's one of the things that kind of put me on my career path to become an instructor prior to becoming a coordinator or the director of training. Because I knew that if I could gain the respect of the men that came into the program and dealing with me as a woman in the classroom, then it would be much easier for them to pass that along once they were on in the job site. The other thing that I thought about is the amount of women that can come in the program seeing someone like them there. So you've heard the saying, I'm sure you've heard it a lot more recently, you have to see it to be it. So it is really crucial for women to be in these positions, in these programs, so that other women can see that it actually is a possibility. we've made quite a bit of changes within my union since 2011. We've moved our numbers from 3% women to 15% right now. Our goal was 20%. I shouldn't say 15, we're about 15 and a half. So I'm going to count that 0.5%. Our goal was 20% by 2020. We did have some hiccups with COVID, but our last graduating class, it was 26% that were women that graduated. And really that's what it's about. It's about retaining people so that they can carry on in the trade and to have a viable career. And, you know, there's really 3 buckets I'll look at. One is having the person prepared. Do you have an individual that's going to be prepared properly? Well, pre-apprenticeship is a way to do that. It gives women support in an environment that's conducive to them learning. It also helps them to build the self-esteem that they need to have in working in a male-dominated trade. The other thing is, do you have goals? And we'll talk a little bit about that later in our breakout section, but that's really important. How do you know where you want to go if you don't know where you are? So it's very important for employers, for companies, for apprenticeship programs to really take a hard look at their numbers and come up with progressive, manageable, reachable goals that have to be consistent and kind of keeping your eye on the ball of those goals. Because if you take your eye off for a second, which we learned, those numbers can drop really quickly. And the third thing is to look at the environment itself, the barriers that are there. What do you need to do to remove those barriers? And we'll call it changing the culture. Because oftentimes in any industry where it's dominated by one gender, you will find there are barriers for people that are different from that gender to come in. And it's important that as employers, as manufacturers, as organizations and government, that we really look at those barriers and take specific steps. For us, it involved training, education, diversity. It involved making people accountable for their actions, monitoring, as the Department of Labor does require us to do, monitoring apprentices and how they're being taught, where they're being placed. All those things are things to kind of keep your eye on, and we've been able to do that and increase our number. So I'm going to say thank you again for this opportunity. I look forward to discussion later on, a panel discussion, so we can talk a little bit more in depth. And right now, I'm going to turn it over to Heidi.
Thank you, Leah. My name is Heidi. I'm the manager of Europtech USA in Clarksburg. We are a very small company, about 38 employees, and we introduced the apprenticeship program about 2 years ago. And the first response from our employees was very exciting, and we had about 6 people they were interested to do. But when we got a little bit more in details and we told them that they also have to do some work, they have to put an effort behind, and so then probably most of them looked at us and said, yeah, but that's not what we expected. So from the 6, which at the time were all excited to start, we ended up with 2 people. We are at the moment in the process to add another 2 people, but we clearly hope that they know they have to do their job too. And that's a little bit sometimes a problem, that the commitment from the employees to get better and put a little bit of effort in, that you can make more money and you can actually excel in your skill level. That is where we have once in a while a hard time. I grew up in Europe, which apprenticeship is very, very known. And when I came 35 years ago to the United States, I was surprised how many people went to college, because that's in Europe pretty much. You go to college when either way for high academic professions, and otherwise the apprenticeship is really widespread. I hope actually that more small companies like we are participating in apprenticeship programs, because we work together with RCBI, and I only can say good things about that. But I also hope that people like advisors in high school, make kids aware that there are options, that if you don't have the possibility to go to college or to a technical college, that there are possibilities that you can excel in your profession and get better. So I really think there is a lot of work to do, but in the future, apprenticeship has to get better, because that's what we really need in manufacturing. We need better skilled people. That's all about I have to say, and thanks again that I got invited, and I will turn it over to Danita.
Hello, Hello, everyone. I do want to thank you for the invite. I'm very excited. This is my first time doing this, but I'm very, very passionate about doing what I do in the manufacturing world. I've been in my position as a production supervisor. I'm in actually with the company I'll be there 21 years as of February 2021. But I came to the company with the intent of, back then they had tuition reimbursement, and I took advantage of that, and I went to school, and I basically worked my way up in the company. I always tell people I grew up in the company, starting from putting the product in the box to working on the machine with the operators, being a floor leader, and then gradually doing some special projects with the departments with bringing new ideas to the facility. That being said, I facilitated, so it sort of opened up a lot for me, being a people person, and it also gave me a little more exposure. I find sometimes when you're doing things routinely every day, people tend to see you in that one position. I came to my organization because of the opportunity, of course, and I was able to go to school, as I said, despite some challenges. As I went to school, I also moved my way up in the organization, and I can say in the business, my goal was to just advance and have growth. But being, I guess, women of color and having personal challenges, because we all have things that will try to deter us, especially being in school, being on different schedules, it can sort of weigh you down. But I've had people actually in my organization when they saw where I was going, and one lady, she pulled me to the side. She said, I know you're in school, it's tough. She said, but, keep going. Your knowledge is something that stays with you, and no one can take that away. And with that, I'm able to project that with people that come in. I'm on the other end of the manufacturing where I'm in charge of ensuring that they are being trained and working with people so they're getting the best, actually the best, I don't want to say, but just the best training overall, because sometimes working with different people, you get different things. And when people come in, especially women, I always like to sit and I talk to them because they tell me they want to advance. So I like to share my story and I share my experience. Just because you're working on a machine, it doesn't mean that you have to stay there, especially with an organization like mine. It's a lot of opportunity. I was able to get my college degree and work my way up, and it makes no sense to me that sometimes we get in a mindset where we can't do things, and that's where our people that we work with and different mentors are able to take us out of that mindset and sort of push us. And with the push, it just opens up different avenues. So the path for me that I chose was just to keep learning. I wanted to learn. I had my support system at home as well as at work. I didn't really have a side-by-side person, but I had different people just coming up to me and wanting me to succeed. But overall, you have to want to succeed. And that's all I really have to say. But my advice to employers or people that want to succeed in apprenticeship programs, they are very well getting more exposure. And I think it's up to the people on the inside to expose that and to make sure that they're comfortable with taking the extra step. Because sometimes people, when they see other people doing things and they know your background, they know your story, it makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. And that's all. Thank you again.
Thank you, Leah, Danita, and Heidi. Your perspectives are great, and we appreciate you sharing them. We're going to dig a little deeper and ask our panel that's coming up to do a little roundtable discussion about how we can best help more women enter and succeed in manufacturing apprenticeships. I'd like to introduce the panel moderator, Barbara Allen. And Barbara is our partner out of Philadelphia. She works with the Philadelphia Workforce Board and is a consultant to the Southern Eastern Pennsylvania Manufacturing Associations, and she's been instrumental in helping us build a new coalition in the Philadelphia area, Women in Non-Traditional Careers, in partnership not only with the Workforce Board, but many industry leaders, unions, and apprenticeship programs, and community-based organizations. Thank you, Barbara, for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm happy to moderate this panel. Today in our roundtable on collective strategies for increasing and retaining women in manufacturing, we have 4 dynamic panelists. Today we have with us Andrea Bordelais, President of Level 1 Fasteners. Andrea graduated from the University of Vermont in 1985 and Washington State University in 1991. Andrea recently retired from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, where she was a research assistant professor in the field of marine natural product chemistry. She moved from Wilmington to Huntington, West Virginia in 2017 to help run family business Level 1 Fasteners, where she is the current president. Level 1 Fasteners manufactures high-quality, fully traceable fasteners used mainly by the U.S. military for production of aircraft carriers and submarines. Andrea also has one daughter, Olivia, who recently graduated from the University of Vermont. We also have with us Natasha Francis, who is an apprentice at Level 1 Fasteners. Natasha entered the Step Up for Women Advanced Manufacturing pre-apprenticeship in the summer of 2017 because she wanted a better life for herself and for her family. She was hired at Level 1 Fasteners in 2018 as a CNC operator. And after excelling at her job and learning some CNC programming, she was accepted into the Level 1 Registered Apprenticeship Program in 2020. I'm also just happy to present Scott Mesa, Engineering Manager for Skender Manufacturing. Scott has spent the last 15 years developing products and manufacturing processes in the automotive industry. His broad product and process engineering experience includes garnering 3 U.S. patents and 2 others that are pending. Scott holds a BS in mechanical engineering from the University of Kentucky. And last but definitely not least, we have Leah Rambo, Training Director and Fund Administrator for the Sheet Metal Workers Union, Local 28. You just heard from Leah, and so you know that she has kind of created a lot of opportunities for women through Local 28. They have increased their percentage of female from 3% in 2011 to 13% in 2019. And as the Director of Training, Leah has been responsible for the training of over 3,000 Local 28 apprentices and active members. So I want to welcome this fantastic panel, and I want to make sure that we just get started right away. And so, Leah, I'm going to like to direct this first question to you because you have kind of trailblazed. You are a trailblazer. So I kind of want to get from your perspective, what were some of the challenges that you experienced entering the industry?
I guess one of the biggest challenges was dealing with isolation, or it's that feeling of always being the redheaded stepchild. So that was probably, I'd say, one of the most challenging things. You would go into a job site, and which is very noisy. If you're in the shop, you imagine all these machines going on, bending metal and cutting it, and when you arrive, it's just kind of like quiet. So that was I guess one of the biggest challenges, and that was scary for me. And then the other thing was trying to gain the respect of the men that I worked with, so that they knew that I was capable and could do my job, because there was almost a daily basis when you are doing something and someone shows you how to do something. Now you're ready to do it, and there's someone else trying to take a tool out of your hand or to do it for you. So I would say those type of things were challenging, and just dealing with constant attention, unwanted attention from the people that were working around me.
Natasha, I'd like to direct that same question to you. Just beginning your apprenticeship program, what challenges are you facing?
I think the biggest challenge I've had so far was just information about the program and how to get started, and where do I begin with my studies. As far as actually having the time to sit down and do the classwork.
Well, let me ask this something else. What recommend?
Can you repeat that?
Apprenticeship to an apprenticeship program. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay. So I'll repeat the question. I was saying, what suggestions might you offer to someone new who's coming in to an apprenticeship program or into manufacturing? What has changed? What recommendations and suggestions would you have?
For them to prepare themselves to kind of balance work and school at the same time. You do have to put a lot of time and effort into it, and kind of keep yourself on a schedule.
So keeping yourself motivated is the key.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Excuse me. I'd like to direct the next question that we have to Andrea. Andrea, what is your organization doing to kind of increase women's participation in the workforce, and what are you doing to reach these goals?
So when I first came here 3 years ago, there was only one woman out in our manufacturing section. And really at that point in time, we were trying to recruit just new employees. So the first thing I did was to go to the local trade schools and to the local high school, like shop classes and machining classes. However, when I went to these, there were no women in those classes at all. So initially, we really weren't trying to recruit women in particular, especially for manufacturing. We have a lot in the office. So we're about 18%. We have 100 or 90 people, and we have about 18% women here now. But it was probably more like 12 or 13 when I first got here. So we would often get applications from women for the manufacturing jobs, but our foreman out in the shop was like, I'm not going to hire women. They don't have any experience. It's like, we need to give them just as much of a chance as men for these jobs. So I was kind of very adamant about that. And then the Step Up for Women program started in 2018. And so what we did is we offered to give tours of our plant, because not a lot of people know about our company. We're kind of keep to ourselves. And so that was an opportunity to bring women in. So we've hired, I think, 5 or 6 women from that program. Currently, we have 3, I believe. So that's kind of what we tried. My goal, I came from academia where about 50% of the workforce is women. I would love to see 50% of women working here. I don't know if we'll see it. I do think there is a big cultural stigma about working in manufacturing, especially in machine shops we have. So I think those are the kinds of barriers that we need to overcome. When people find out that we have good, steady jobs, that we continue on completely, we didn't shut down at all. In fact, we have grown through the pandemic, so that hopefully we'll see more women applying to these positions when we have them open.
Thank you. So, Leah, you're kind of on both sides of the aisle with this, in the sense that you came into manufacturing as an apprentice, and now you're operating with the local union. Can you tell me what you guys are doing? Because it's rather impressive what you've done, going from 3% to almost, as you said, to your goal of 20%. Can you tell us what you're doing to make that happen?
Sure. The first thing that we did was we set the goal. And it may seem, elementary, but it's really something that you have to do first. You have to look at where you are. So we were shocked when we looked and we saw we were only at 3%, because, there's a woman on the job site. A company could say, I have a woman here, there's a woman in the classroom. But when we started to crunch the numbers 3%, and we recognized that was a pretty sad number. So then we looked at, okay, what's preventing us from getting women? So I looked at how are we doing our recruitment. When we do our recruitment, do I just grab indiscriminately a group of students, or am I, looking to make sure that I have, a diverse group of people? And so that's what we started doing. So if there was one woman in the school and it was a day of recruitment, then we took her. And we used her, we did a lot of our recruitment using our apprentices while they were in school, because in our apprenticeship program, you were paid while you were in school. So they would still be getting paid for the day. And then some of the stuff was really what I knew from as an apprentice and going through my career, is that you can give it to a job site and you might be kind of put in a corner or just doing the one job, as Danita mentioned, like working one machine and not being moved around. So we made sure that the employers that we work with knew the requirements to rotate those apprentices, make sure that they're well-rounded. And what we found out is that the more well-rounded we were able to have the apprentices, and the better we were able to train them, then the more the field was even, because you were looking at a well-trained woman and a well-trained man. And whereas before, you might be looking at a well-trained man and a woman who's really poorly trained. So between that and being a woman, and then oftentimes a person of color, there was just no way you were going to be successful in the trade. So we monitored our contractors. We monitored what we call our blue books. The Department of Labor, it requires the apprenticeships, to be able to say, okay, what are they doing on that on-the-job training? What specifically are they doing, and what tasks do they need to do so that when they graduate, then you could say, hey, this person I'm comfortable with and know that, they know their stuff. So it was a lot of, really a lot of mechanical things and looking how we're being trained. You know, are we using women to get women in? Are we working with pre-apprenticeship programs, right? Everything shows there's a higher success rate in apprenticeship programs when they go through a pre-apprenticeship program. And we've looked, I see someone put in the chat, don't forget CTE. I mean, that's one of the big areas we looked at, career and technical education schools. And we started doing our recruiting there. And anyone that we went to, whether it was helmets to hard hats or career and technical education or any of our direct entry partners, we made sure that they knew that we had goals regarding women, regarding minorities, and so that we expected our feeder institutions to also to be diverse and to be able to provide us with women. I don't hear anything. I don't know if your mic is muted or.
I'm sorry. Oh. I'm sorry. So I just want to let you know I haven't forgotten about you, but I wanted to kind of get you in, and I wanted to know what challenges and successes has your organization incurred in recruiting and retaining women? Did I lose Scott?
Cut out there when you said who you were addressing. I didn't know that was directed to me. I apologize. But just to echo some of what's already been said, I think that being able to demonstrate a very diverse workforce definitely helps with recruiting. When we were setting up our current factory, we did a lot of similar to what Andrew was talking about with outreach and having tours brought through. So as we started onboarding, people could kind of see what a diverse and inclusive workforce we currently had. So that it certainly helps with recruiting. And when you've established that reputation, it does continue to allow you to recruit talent across a very broad range of individuals. So just gaining that reputation and starting with that mainly through your outreach, I think is a great way to start. As far as some of our goals, we've been able to recruit and retain women for a variety of leadership roles. When we were setting up our welding program, we ended up hiring in 40% of our welders are women in the factory. So and a lot of that it started with that outreach.
Great, thank you. One of the questions that we have in the chat is basically, and I think this is for anyone on the panel, is how can the no woman allowed culture be expelled?
I'd like to address that question. Let me start it off. When I became the director of training and I would dispatch apprentices, female apprentices to a contractor, I would have contractors back in 2011 that would say to me, "Oh, come on, Leah, you're not going to send me a girl now. Don't do that to me. I don't have to take a girl, do I?" And I would tell them, well, and then they would say, "Oh, can I say that?" So, okay, well, no, you can't say that, and yes, you do have to take one. And if she doesn't do well, that's fine. You just write up to me exactly what it was, and then I'll send you someone else, which would also often be another woman if that was the case, until they found someone they were comfortable with. So sometimes it's really, I think it was about really just directly letting them know, this is the policy. No, you can't say you don't want a woman. You do have to take a woman. But at the same time, we don't expect you to take anyone for any business that's not going to be successful, that's not willing to come to work every day, that's not able to follow, very simple instructions. And so that's why the portion of them documenting and to keep track and monitor and evaluate their apprentices was so important. Because as they started evaluating and monitoring people, then it's hard to say, well, I don't want this woman because of this reason, unless that's been a consistent pattern of not keeping apprentices for that reason. And we've even noticed there are times that a woman was getting laid off for her attendance, and then when I looked at the male apprentices, they had much worse attendance. And really pointed that out to the employer because it wasn't something the employer recognized that they were doing. She just stood out more because there were less women on the job.
Francis, I do have a question for you, which I think is a really important one. And it came from our chat room, and we have a question that wants to know, what helped you gain acceptance, and how would you get the word out to other women to get involved in manufacturing or any other non-traditional occupation for women?
As far as acceptance in the workplace, you just really have to step up and show the guys that you can do exactly what they're doing. I mean, you just do your job as well as you can and use the skills that you have. I'm not saying be in competition, but what was the second question? I'm sorry.
Basically, what did you do to gain acceptance, and what would you do to get the word out to other women who might want to get involved in manufacturing or other non-traditional occupations?
To get the word out to get others involved, I think I'd want to reach out to the local trade schools like Andrea said, and I'd really like to see more high school girls get involved because there aren't a lot of programs at that age level that will pull women in. I mean, you have your basic shop class, but how many women do you see in a shop class training for a manufacturing program?
Okay. All right. Thank you. Another question that's basically for anyone, and we've been talking a lot about the apprenticeship programs and just basically the importance of getting women involved. And I guess I want to find out, why should women consider a career in the manufacturing industry?
Well, I can do that. Even though I haven't been in manufacturing for a long time, for me, I was a parent, for me, it was super important to have a reliable job where I could support my child and get her into a good daycare, child care, and really have something that I'm proud of. And I can see manufacturing being a career and having a young woman come in with fairly decent salaries and to progress up the scale, by learning, by doing an apprenticeship program, by really showing that she is just as good as men, if not better. Women also, for us, it's kind of good to have women out in the shop because I think it's kind of softened that culture that we have out there of not communicating and not training people as well as we would like. So having women and the apprenticeship program is really helping to bridge the communication gap that I saw when I came to this company. And also just getting everybody, or as many people as we can, kind of on the same level of manufacturing skill as quickly as possible. I mean, that's really important if you want to manufacture high precision parts. Everybody has to be pretty good, and there is a learning curve there, and the apprenticeship program helps to kind of standardize the training and making sure that everybody is getting a good training, even if their trainer is not especially good. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, thank you. I work in Philadelphia with a group of manufacturers, and I know sometimes we're trying to increase those opportunities for women in our area region. And in some discussions that I've had with them, it's not the administration who's unwilling, but basically how they kind of educate their staff. So I'm curious as to what any of the managers to their managers about how to empower women and support women that they're bringing into their organization. We hear sometimes that women go in, but they don't necessarily feel welcome coming back to that question of culture.
Training is key. One of the things that we required is that all of our staff, all of our instructors go through diversity training. I mean, in addition to sexual harassment training, we focused on diversity and inclusion training because we wanted across the board the culture to be inclusive so that, you know, if they got comfortable with women, you know, well, then is there going to be another issue later on because of this person's, you know, religion or this person's sexual orientation or this person's whatever. So across the board, that's what we did our training on. And we also talked about just acceptable professional behavior in the workplace. Because traditionally in our, you know, in manufacturing trade, this goes overlooked. Oftentimes it's kind of a little bit of a free-for-all. And people oftentimes don't know what's acceptable behavior in our industry. And the bottom line is, it's the same acceptable behavior in other places. There's a way you have to act. There's a way you have to, you know, carry on. There's things you can say, the things you can't say. So I think the training was really the first step because then once a person is trained, now they're accountable for their behavior, and then to follow up when things do come up, to act, you know, quickly and decisively to correct the problems as they arise and not sweep anything under the rug, to really address all issues that come up.
Okay. Anyone else have anything to add to that? All right. I talked about the prison apprenticeship participants with employers. There seems to be a large gap with apprenticeship programs outside of corrections that do not want to work with correctional agencies, and these programs are missing out on an opportunity to take on individuals that have previous experience and youth ambition. Can you share your thoughts on basically how we might be able to, especially since we're talking about inclusion and equity, how we might be able to link those programs together and with employers with those programs? Anyone can jump in. Scott, any ideas?
I don't have any experience in working with those programs.
Okay.
You know, I would say traditionally within the building trade unions, there's really no issue at all with giving people second opportunities. So I'm going to talk about the sheet metal industry, which has manufacturing shops and production shops. If they're leaning towards the unionized industry, that is not something we don't check people's records. Now there are certain jobs that may take, you know, maybe certain federal jobs or maybe the school construction authority that you may have to go through background checks for specific jobs, the job site. But in the shop itself, we don't discriminate. We look at, are you able to do the work? Are you following the rules? Not look at what you did prior to you coming to us. And we also have actually even have partnered up with, in New York, we partnered up with the Women's Bureau and actually have at times talked to women who were recently, you know, released from prison.
So, Andrea, thank you. Andrea, do you find it harder to recruit and retain females?
Yeah.
Tell me some of the
Definitely.
reasons they stated for leaving.
Well, they haven't. Some of the problems have been due to interactions with coworkers, and I've worked very hard on addressing kind of our male culture here. When I first got here, I interviewed every person in our company and asked them the good things and the bad things about our company. And one continual thing that came up was that the supervisors yell at employees and they didn't like it. So that was kind of my first mandate I put down, is that no more yelling at employees. And if you have a problem with someone, you come talk to me and we'll talk about how to discipline or correct that person. You don't need to yell at them. Still goes on here, but not nearly as much as it did. So I think some of the women that have left, it has been kind of interpersonal disturbances between them and their supervisor. And I have tried to address that as much as possible. Some people, it's just attrition. They find different jobs. Some have left. Some of the women have left for better jobs, so they've used our company as a stepping stone to a better or different job. So I am definitely aware that there are some kind of domineering men out there, and I have worked with them. We've discussed problems because they kind of just, I think, treat the women in some cases just like the guys, and women are not necessarily as have a type of constitution as some of the guys. So we have been working on that.
Okay, thank you. Scott, I'd like to know, because Andrea just touched on that in terms of the types of jobs, what types of jobs are available for women, older women in manufacturing, or for women in general?
Really, the sky's the limit. I mean, within the manufacturing industry, it's just such a dynamic workplace. It kind of has maybe a little bit of a stigma as being somewhat archaic and everything is now automated, but the inclusion of technology doesn't necessarily exclude the human element. So, when you come into a new company, they're always looking for new ways to improve efficiencies and reduce costs to stay competitive. So implementing any one of new operations, new technologies, new tools can help the business and can really advance somebody's career individually. So there's a lot of opportunity in manufacturing for somebody who's open to learning new skills.
Okay. And I want to follow up with that, Scott, because I have a question here that wants to know how your partnership with Chicago Women in Trades has benefited you in finding candidates.
Really, as I mentioned before, that we've been able to start with a very diverse and inclusive workforce, and that's really enabled us to recruit across a very broad range of people and help us retain that talent because everybody's very, a lot of different groups are very well represented within our company.
Okay, fantastic. Francis, I want to come back to you because you're working in an area that is very much in demand. I know here in the Philadelphia area as a CNC programmer. So can you share your experiences about working with a CNC operator? I don't know. Francis, did you hear me? Do you need me to repeat it? Okay, I just wanted to know, basically, you're in an in-demand area in terms of CNC operator and programming. So I just wanted to know if you could share a little bit about that experience and why you actually chose that career path in manufacturing.
It's an odd way to answer it, but I came from an artistic background prior to working in manufacturing. And for me, it's still a way to kind of feed that to others' design. I enjoy the type of manufacturing that I do because I get to work with my hands and I get to incorporate, the mathematics skills and work with computer programming, which helps me in other areas of my life. It's a good skill set to have, and it can be applied to a lot of different careers, not just this one. But with the path that I took, I feel like I get to make a difference, and I know that the parts that we make are actually going into the good cause, so to speak.
Thank you. We're getting some excellent questions in the chat room. So I know one of them, and I think this is for our employers on the panel, they want to know how one can expose high school students, girls in manufacturing, if they're not at a vocational, a VOTEC school.
If they're on the East Coast, or especially Northeast, then I would suggest them contacting Non-Traditional Employment for Women. They do have a program now that works with high school girls, and they primarily are looking at career and technical education high schools, but anyone in, at least in New York Department of Education, New York City Department of Education can qualify. Another organization that specifically deals with girls is Tools and Tiaras, where they have monthly workshops. They have a summer camp. This year was the first virtual summer camp where, young girls, tiny tots, 6, 7 years old, doing plumbing projects, carpentry projects, sheet metal projects. So they're learning how to, work with their hands early on. And so those are just two organizations I can think of right offhand that specifically work with young girls and expose them.
The other thing that I would kind of like to know is that Scott mentioned that some folks have an archaic view of what manufacturing is. It was also mentioned that talking about automation in terms of manufacturing. So I guess I want to know how young is too young? We're all in agreement that we need to get more women into manufacturing. So when do we start? Do we start at elementary school? Do we start at middle school? And I know, what do we do also to kind of change the mindset?
Start young. Start young.
Start young. Yep, definitely start young. I would say start in grade school because, everyone kind of identifies with what they want to do and what they want to be kind of fairly young. And it might not be exactly, you might not end up exactly doing what you want, but, health fields or science fields or manufacturing, that starts really early, that identification of what you can do and what you're good at. So I think, probably grade school, middle school is a great place to start, if not earlier.
Yeah, I'm going to say grade school or earlier. I got my first tool set, I was about 9 or 10. So 9 or 10, my parents stopped buying me dolls and started getting into tools, and it carried on. And I had one little niece, probably by the age of 6, with her little tiny skinny arms, following me around while I was doing projects, trying to pick up my drill. And she came in, and joined me in my trade at age 17. So, and her 2 sisters followed her. So the younger, it's really about exposure, especially to, these young girls. You want to give them exposure as many things as possible. And I think we'll have much higher percentages. Picking manufacturing trades because it's fun. That's the bottom line. It really is. It's a lot of fun working with your hands. It's very satisfying, putting something together that you can look at afterwards. And as Andrea mentioned, she was saying, she came from an artist background, artistic background, so that's the creative side. If you're a very creative person, this is something that you can naturally be drawn to. If you like math and science, this is something that you will just naturally be drawn to when you're able to see, the application of something that you already love and how it fits into these, careers in manufacturing.
Okay. All right. We're coming up close to our time. We have a few minutes left. But just to follow up on what Mia mentioned with respect to exposure, do any of you have active co-ops or internship programs that you're working with either tech schools or seek to be able to expose more women, young girls to manufacturing?
An internship program at our company.
Well, we
I don't know if
have,
you heard that.
yeah.
We do not have one.
And we work with, New York City, the CTE high schools, the career and technical education high schools, and then they have a gender equity committee that I'm involved with, and so whereas we haven't been able to get any interns in for the actual trade itself, but I've been able to get interns involved in at the school. And of course, while they're in the school, all I do is, preach the trade. So in that respect, we have been able to expose, girls at the high school age to, to our trade, and have seen some of them, come in. It's still early; it's a new program, but we are seeing them come into with us, or sometimes they just pick another place, but still they're picking non-traditional fields.
Okay. Scott, we're getting ready to wrap up. Any closing comments?
No, I just, to the last comment, we do work with the Jane Addams Resource Corporation to help identify and recruit talent. We don't have any open internships at the moment, as we're still kind of ramping up, but we do work very closely with them to kind of identify some gaps that might be present between where their training leaves off and where our required skill sets pick up. But one thing I would encourage is, any women that are in the trades or in manufacturing, if you can do any kind of outreach or mentoring, I think it really means a lot to hear somebody who has lived or is living that life in that field.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone on the panel. I think the insight that you provided today has been invaluable. And I also want to remind everybody that you can still go to the Mira board to post any questions or comments that you might have. And at this point, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel for them to wrap it up for us today. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Barbara, and to each of our panelists. I'm Christina, and I'm just going to run through a quick summary today before we wrap up for the day. And I'm also going to do a quick summary of some of the feedback that we had over on the Miro board, too. There's a lot of activity over there, a lot of really great information. But to start with our summary from our panel that we just heard, and from all of our speakers, we really went through a lot of valuable insights from their experiences on both recruitment and retention. And so on the recruitment side, everybody, I think, really agreed that we have to work to define what really resonates with women and play to that. So we heard from Andrea that for her, stability and having pride in her work was really important. So being able to identify that and use that as we're recruiting is really helpful. Leah and Danita both mentioned taking the women that you already have on your staff and using them in events to help you recruit other women. We had a comment over in the chat, said you can't be what you can't see. I think Leah mentioned that one too, and that one's really so important. Also under recruitment, we had a lot of discussion on using high schools and VOTEX, but really going sooner than that and talking to grade school kids, both boys and girls, to really to work to break down those gender biases and barriers around who can take on what kind of jobs in the future. And then that helps to get girls into those classes. We need the girls to be in the classes in the high school if that's where we're going to recruit. So starting much, much sooner. And then working with organizations that are focused on women and girls. And Leah gave some great examples, and a quick Google search will also help to identify those organizations close to you. And then also over in the chat, we do have a link to the Gender Equity Partners that work with CWIT across the country. So you can find one that's close to you, and they can either work outside of their own state or they can help you to identify an organization near you. On the retention side, there was a lot of talk about workplace culture. Andrea talked about going around and polling the workers in her organization for both what's good and what's bad, and really starting to address some of the bad. So doing that internal work with your managers, figuring out maybe if they have some gender biases that need to be worked on. And Leah agreed with that by saying training is key, and not just the initial training, but the follow-up, and really sticking to what you've trained your people on doing, and making sure that there is some action when people stray from that training. Also offering opportunities for women to advance. That came up several times. That was a theme among many of our speakers. Scott spoke to always incorporating new tech, giving people new things to learn to advance. And Danita mentioned that just having that ability to advance in her own career with the company she's with was really very vital to her long-term career in manufacturing. And then things like addressing isolation. You know, what are the things that our women are facing once they're already on board? Leah said that that was something that in the beginning was very scary for her. And then also Danita mentioned that someone pulled her aside and really encouraged her to stick with it. And we all know that is mentoring. So figuring out, you know, what is difficult for women and what are the answers to those difficulties, and then incorporating programs like mentorship programs can be really important. Okay, so let's do a quick wrap up of our Miro board here. Let's see. It looks like everybody really participated over here on Miro, and we got some really great feedback. A lot of the barriers that we're seeing over here are around childcare, and I'm really excited to say that tomorrow, one of our more in-depth speakers will be speaking to childcare and the techniques that they've been using in Mississippi in the Women in Construction program. And then over on the opportunities side, a lot of what we heard about in our recruitment speeches, things like using the women that you already have on staff to help you out, showing your female team members in your ads, in your recruiting. So if you haven't had a chance to hop over to Miro yet, that will stay open once today's call ends, and it will be open prior to the start of tomorrow. So I think we had a lot of really great information today. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. If you haven't registered yet, please take the chance to go and register now. The link is over in the chat. There we go. Mark just tossed it up. Thank you so much, Mark. All right, so unless JFF, oh, here we go. Here's our agenda for tomorrow. I'll just do a quick run through of this. I know we're run over by a few minutes. But tomorrow we have some really great topics. How do you prepare women to be competitive candidates? So I know that on the call, we probably have more employers that will be joining us tomorrow versus women's organizations or pre-apprenticeship programs. So as an employer, what are things that you can be doing to incorporate some of the practices that have made these women's organizations and pre-apprenticeship programs so successful? If you don't have a group near you, are there things you could do to mimic what they're doing? Implicit bias in application and assessment practices. This will be more of a training type presentation with a lot of great information up on the screen to follow along with. Best practices in gender equitable preparatory or pre-apprenticeship programs. That will be myself, and I'll be speaking a lot on how to recruit. And then we'll also have a speaker from Women in Construction that will be going more in depth into the childcare barriers. Addressing the intersection of race and gender, we have a really great panel planned for tomorrow where women will be sharing their experiences of women in color in manufacturing. And then we're also going to have a great training, bystander training on understanding microaggressions, which again will be more of a training type presentation with some great information up on slides that you can follow along with. And then how to be an ally. How do we support tradeswomen's success? So we have a lot planned out for tomorrow that I'm really looking forward to going through with all of you, and I hope that everyone can join us tomorrow and bring a friend. Thanks a lot, everybody.
you.
So does that mean we're off the air?